did you see, Don, that YouTube, to hell with trial, to hell with a judge and a jury, YouTube has demonetized Russel Brand. I don't know how this is not illegal, man. I mean, do we not live in the United States of America anymore? Don Debar, your thoughts on them without trial, without jury, without an arrest warrant, without a crime, just the mainstream media putting shit out there and somebody having to paying a price for it. This is ridiculous. Go ahead.
Okay, first of all, YouTube, which is owned by Google, which is owned, what do they call that now? There's another
Alphabet.
Yeah, Alphabet. Yeah, A to Z, baby, A to Z. That's what they own, from A to Z. And they have this internet product, a series of internet products. They're indexed to the internet. They're videos from all over the world. They don't pay anybody for any of it. People put it up. They go on these servers that are the research and development for them is all paid for by taxpayers. The places where they physically store these things are heavily subsidized by taxpayers. They build them with Industrial Development Agency tax abatements, and they're funded with federal and all kinds of other government money. The entire operation runs either through satellites that were developed by the government and NASA and our tax dollars, broadcasting through the air or strung over the public streets. All of this.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but it sounds like you're talking something that's called public easements, meaning that a company enters an agreement with the citizens of the United States using public land, public properties, satellites, telephone poles, meaning they have a direct relationship and a contract with us. And the first things first, they're supposed to honor freedom of speech. Please continue.
Yeah. This is what one would think. And so this private corporation that is the product of all this public money and public resources is acting as a gatekeeper for other private interests in conjunction with the government, and in some cases, according to substantial evidence, at the instruction of the government, serving the interests of certain factions within the government, even against other factions in the government, and all against the public. So what happens is they decide, in essence, who can see what. And they've decided that what comes out of Russel's mouth is something that's not going to be heard. This is supposedly because he supposedly, and who knows what happened with these allegations about sexual whatever, but it's such a coincidence that what he says that's banned for this is also what other people say is banned for a dozen other reasons. And people, meanwhile, can recruit for ISIS and Al-Qaeda and Nazis in Ukraine and whatever unimpeded. That doesn't violate community standards.
Let me ask you something, since we're on the community standards, because this is what's going to be said, Don, and this is another argument. They're going to say, okay, but they didn't take down his channel. They're not they're not shadow banning him. They're just simply demonetizing him, meaning he cannot make money. Now, I would argue that that would affect the algorithm because it's tied to if you're going to get shown and not get shown, and that is part of the demonetization. But do they have the right to do that and restrict you from making dollars and cents, even with these public easements there? Do they have a right to do that, Don? Because I don't see that they do have that right unless they are consistent for everybody across the board. Go ahead.
Well, it depends on who you ask. Excuse me. And it also depends on the nature of the individual contracts or agreements, whether they're written, tacit, assembled through practice, whatever. But I'm going to bet if the current litigation, for example, that Robert Kennedy's brought against Google and others, and just the entire legal climate around free speech and around this private management of free speech, that the courts are going to say that it is legal, that the most important aspect of this in terms of free speech is the free speech of Alphabet, of the corporation. They have the absolute right under the First Amendment, according to this line of thinking, because they are a private entity, to say whatever they like. If you want to say whatever you like on par with them, go build the same infrastructure they have and compete for this space. That's the logic behind the argument. And that's the argument, of course. Now, the problem is what they have is ours.
Yes.
So someone should force them to put that in a pool, and then we all have access to it. That's apparently not something that anyone is really contemplating outside of Robert Kennedy talking about,
Can
that
we
kind
borrow your satellite, right? You can't do that. You can't borrow a satellite. Okay, but what about Section 230, which simply says that you are shielded from any type of litigation as long as you promise to act as a platform and not a publisher, meaning you can't pick winners and losers. You have to be consistent across the board. At the very least, I think they should have to be transparent on how, who, and why they demonetize, block, or ban somebody. But that protection means, hey, you got to be consistent across the board. That's like saying I have a private business, but I can have a water fountain that says whites only. I mean, is that, I don't mean to make a crazy comparison, right? But you're subsidizing people's voices, people's right to exist, everything. Is that a fair statement or a little bit too much?
No, conceptually, you're right. I take a lot of little research to think about the legal implications of it. But conceptually, what you're talking about is that there are these public policy goals that supersede all of this bundle of rights that is claimed and or respected in players like Alphabet, that you can do whatever you want, but you can't do this. Well, the thing that they're allowed to do is to gatekeep what's said in the public domain. And they're allowed to do that in conjunction with the government, at least so far. That's how it's been portrayed. Now, I haven't looked at the latest things. I know that there's a case involving Google, and it might be RFK's case. I'm not even sure. I get so damn many of them in my head. That there was a stay that was lifted, but then a decision that was favorable, and not, I don't even know, it's not a final adjudication of it, but some interlocutory action that, something in the process that was favorable and moving forward is going to help. I don't know how any of these cases, and there's several, are going to play out, but this being challenged, and on top of it, I think it's Robert Epstein is the guy's name, who's in fact you had him on Jimmy Dore.
Roger Epstein.
Yeah, Epstein. Yeah, he I understand, to differentiate from our friend with the island. Yeah. That, Google has been cooking the returns. In other words, I search for information about the 2016 election, and I get Hillary Clinton campaign posters, basically, and pictures of Donald Trump having sex with his sheep. This is the kind of manipulation, I'm exaggerating just to illustrate it, but not much, by the way, that was used. And he says, using his calculus, it swung millions of votes. And this happens if they're doing it with an election. You have a million public policy positions, including how do you dispose of private rights in the face of a huge public need for communication in a communications platform developed by the public. That kind of stuff also is that whole public conversation takes place through their manipulated process. So we have some serious problems on this score.
Do you believe that Donald Trump is a part of the whole thing, like they're demonizing him or villainizing him to kind of uplift this? Because it seems like they're just pushing it now at this point. Like when they did that the other day, right? And today saying, Russell Brand can't make money. It seems like another issue in a series of issues where the people are going, this is just ridiculous. This is just crazy. You know what I'm saying? Yes. What are your thoughts? You think he's a wolf in sheep clothing, or do you think he's actually being persecuted because he is a threat to the establishment?
I mean, one of the problems with unreliable information, with basically a public space saturated with propaganda, advertising, and general bullshit, is and particularly where the consumers have most of their personal contact with these media platforms instead of with each other. So that if I take in 100 units of information today, whereas 100 years ago, 100% of it came from my seeing, feeling, smelling, touching these things. Now it's being fed to me, manipulated 80% of it, 80 units of that 100 or whatever. So this stuff makes a much deeper impression on me because it's part of my database. I've got like this much reality and that much of their reality. So to answer your question, looking at Trump, looking at what they're doing, some people could say, well, they demonetized Russell Brand to make him out to be a hero, so we can now get him to say secretly this bullshit we want him to sell, and gullible people will buy it. They do that with, you have people that believe, for example, that China's Communist Party is actually in bed with the elite here, and they are developing the next model of oppression and slavery in China on behalf of the elite here. That's why the money went from here to there to help them develop, and blah, blah, blah. And so the logical conclusion of that is, when these guys here are telling us we need to have a war with China, or we need to do this or that with China, we're going to be like, yeah, because we're really rebelling against our slave masters. This is everywhere. Everything that we look at has this contradiction. It's like nested bullshit. And it's really hard for us to parse it, because we have almost all of our information in our heads that comes in is virtual, not verifiable up front and close. And so, we have a problem with this.
And the thing that's crazy, that why people can't understand sometimes, why I'm so like, when people are anti-communist, they think I'm a communist right away. When I tell people stop being anti-communist, they think I'm a communist. When I tell people stop being an anti-Marxist, they think I'm a Marxist. I'm like, no, I mean, if I had to define myself, which I don't even know what labels mean anymore, I think I'd call myself a leftist libertarian. I want a mixed economy where, we have safeguards for the poorest of the poor. And, what I'm saying, but we can still have choice, because I've been to Cuba, and there's a lot of people who want to own their own restaurants, do their own thing. And I get it. But, a mixture of both. The reason, getting back to why I get so mad when people are anti-communist, is because I think it's a manufacturing of consent to go and get involved regime change wise in Latin America, which has been ridiculous, that we keep expanding all these bases over here. We have all these people in New York going, stop sending the immigrants here, stop sending the immigrants here, but they don't even think about why these immigrants are coming here, and they're not acknowledging the fact that it's not bases there, it's an occupation in Latin America. So our corporations can keep the frigging country destabled, extract the resources for pennies on the dollar, make sure they're using our monetary system, and then also just smear and defame any type of socialistic government that can show some actual growth and benefits and help for the people. And that's why I get so mad about it. I also get mad, people, and tell me if I'm right or wrong. Well, somebody said the other day, there's 60% of the pork that we eat in the United States is owned by the Chinese. Instead of saying owned by a Chinese company, as if they don't have their own oligarchs, as if they don't have their own banks, as if they don't have anything. So when you say it's owned by the Chinese, and everybody's mind, it's the CCP actually owning a pork company, when it just is the owner happens to be from China.
The language is obviously imprecise for a reason. And the first reason is it's intrinsically racist. I mean, this is one of the...
It is.
Yeah. The point being, I mean, how many movies go back to even World War II and before, by the way? This wasn't invented because of Pearl Harbor. Okay. Mm-hmm. The imagery in the West of people in Asia, it's like ant colonies. Everyone looks exactly the same, thinks the same. They're inscrutable. We can't understand them. They got their own secret little thing going on, etc. So when you say the Chinese, you're massaging all these images, and you're not dealing with people like, all right, so this is Huawei Corporation, okay, which is a big, industrial combine, information technology, all of this. Competing like Apple, like a million other tech companies, except one of the biggest ones, and instead you have it's an alien threat, basically, packed inside a cell phone or a laptop or whatever. The language is used purposefully, and it massages propaganda that's been installed in the population going back at least 100 years.
Yeah, it's crazy. I get nervous about it. There was a guy who, and guys, we're almost at 600 subscribers on the new channel. If you haven't gone over and subscribe to the new channel, Craig Pasta Jardula. All right, so here, for instance, let's talk about this really quick. So look at this. Yeah, Pasta, that doesn't change the fact that these illegals are taking food off the table for me and my family. Well, the government that you live under has all these bases over there, Jorge or George. I don't know what you want to be called. I mean, how the fact if you don't want them to come here, then why are you okaying for them to be over there? Instead of this close the border, why don't you wear a shirt that says close the bases? Our actions in our foreign policy when it comes to our empire spreading everywhere is a direct result of why migrants have to go other places, especially the wars. You know what's going on in Italy right now? Well, maybe if we didn't have the West stick our nose where it doesn't belong and allow these people to have something called national sovereignty, they wouldn't show up on our doorstep. Go ahead, Don Debar.
Well, I mean, Southcom, WinSec, all these, this is the architecture of the military occupation of Central and South America and the Caribbean. Mm-hmm. This has been an occupation that's been, in the making and in practice since the beginning of the 19th century, President Monroe. If you look at places where, people have thrown off the boot of the U.S. from their neck. We just looked at, commemorations for 50 years ago in Chile, September 11th, 1973, when the people of Chile elected a socialist, a moderate socialist by the standards of the day, by the way. And he was taken out. He killed himself with 2 machine guns from 100 feet behind him and was taken out, and a fascist dictator installed, coordinated by Henry Kissinger and Richard Nixon. On the record, pretty much, it came out. Even murdering Americans, Charles, what was his name? Charles Hormel, I forgot, Hormel or something. A journalist, an American journalist, that was covered up by the U.S. government. Across, look at what happened in Ecuador. They elected Lenin Moreno, who ran as a successor to the previous socialist president, and they bought him off, basically. As soon as he came in, he kicked Julian Assange out of the embassy in the UK. And
an IMF loan.
The whole bit. And that's one of the things that they do. Immediately after these governments do away with or cut deeply into the extracting debt on behalf of organizations or entities like the IMF and the World Bank and all of it, and bondholders in the West and everything, and they start applying the revenues and the resources of the country to solving the problems of their people, like building a few million apartments in Venezuela where there used to be tin shacks. As soon as that happens, then suddenly this is a persona non grata on the global stage. You're a non-state, you're a rogue state. You get sanctioned, you get drone strikes, you get all kinds of things. They try to kill the leaders, and sometimes they do, or they buy them off, and often they do that. Look at Chile now, and look at Colombia now also. And look at what happened when Xiomara Castro won election, and her party won a majority in Honduras in the assembly. When they tried to impeach her on the way in. Enough people in her own party got bought off that when they got elected, running with her to do her program, as soon as they were installed, they were trying to thwart it. This is the invisible hand of the United States. You have Southcom and the DEA and all kinds of paramilitary groups from the U.S. From basically south of Mexico, Guatemala, down to Chile and Argentina, in the southern tip of South America. And you also have the private groups, both the local government, where there's overt fascists in charge, trained by the American military and WinSec, formerly the School of the Americas, and also private gangs, more or less, drug traffickers and such, that kill people. So you're the grandson of Malcolm X, and you come out of your, an adolescent haze. You come up as an adult. You start engaging in the international stage. You're about to go to Iran. You stop off for a vacation in Mexico, and you get murdered in a barroom fight by thugs. These thugs do this stuff all over under the control of the United States. This is what we see here in Central South America and the Caribbean. The same goes on in Africa. They're trying to throw it off now in the Sahel. and also in other parts of Africa, like in Congo and elsewhere. And the same has been going on in Asia. Look at what we did in Vietnam alone, or in Korea.
Yeah. And this guy, Jorge Rosas, thank you so much. I understand that, Pasta, but it still doesn't change reality. You need to change your mindset, buddy. You're complaining about like you going and punching somebody in the face 5 times, and then they punch you back once, and you're going to complain and say they punched me. Yeah, you punched him 5 times. Just in the Guatemalan election not too long ago, Don, while you were talking about it, and I was in Honduras for that election after they try to once again and then get inside the parliament of sorts. In Guatemala, the State Department worked with the country to make sure that the indigenous folks were not on the ballot. Why? Right. Because they're so afraid that Guatemala is going to do what they did before, and that's nationalize their fruit and kick out Dole and Chiquita, which was once the United Fruit Company, which is who convinced the United States government to overturn their leaders because they were nationalizing their fruit. And that is what's going on. We do this all the time. We got many more bases we built in Peru. And I really would like to know more in Colombia, even some in Honduras, and they don't even want us there. But I really would like to know who whacked the Haitian president too as well last, who was behind that. Guys, do us a favor. Go over to my new YouTube channel. It's Craig Pasta Jardula. If you haven't found the link, one word. September 29th, which is a week from this Friday, I will be premiering Lahaina on Fire, the Aftermath, Volume 1. It's some of the best work I've done, guys, because you guys funded me on a long weekend, and you gave me enough money to bring a camera guy. I went and had a camera guy just follow me everywhere. Interviews, reports, food, the whole 9 yards, the people. We have been able to raise almost $50,000 by showing some of this stuff on the Jimmy Dore Show for one of the mutual aids. So you don't have to worry about Oprah or The Rock gobbling up your money. It went directly to the people. I was able to go see it myself and then provide the links to help these people out. So we're doing some amazing things out there. Thank you so much.